Alright, try and do this video while the kids are awake, which is risky, but wanted to go over the finals as is become a bit of a tradition now that the season's wrapped up. I don't mind talking about it, especially when I'm not going to be playing next season, so I can kind of more thoroughly talk about my thoughts without spoiling anything in the future or anything like that. Obviously, it kind of sucks that this is the second time in 3 seasons that we're doing a losing finals recap. It's been a while since we had a winning finals, but I wanted to start out just by kind of talking about our thoughts going through, which is why I'm locked in on the previous series with MHK here. I definitely think that obviously I talked about I'm a very blunt person when it comes to my own self-analysis of like how good a team is or what their chances are. And that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna, if I feel like a team's way better than me, I'm not gonna like try harder. I don't believe that I can beat them because I have the confidence that I can beat anybody. It doesn't matter how good they are. But I was definitely being, people always wonder how serious I'm being in the Discord. And the truth is that there's always going to be a kernel of truth to what I'm saying, but I'm probably playing it up quite a bit. And the truth is that I honestly believe that no team was going to touch Ligma when we had played them in week 3. They just were so far beyond every team that in our 10 seasons, the only team that was somewhat close to comparable was old PSGS season back when we did I don't remember what the division names were back then. I legitimately can't remember. But they felt so far above everybody else that I felt like it was kind of almost like a pointless season. Obviously, the alt account stuff happened, and when we played Ligma again, turned out that a lot of that success was either rotated around blunted or without blunted, the rest of the team just fell apart. I'm not sure what a combination of, if it was a combination of the two or what. But once they were out, obviously I didn't say this directly, but my feelings at that time were MHK is now the best team, but we can beat them. My only concern was that MHK being new to the league might end up doing what RMB did their first season of league, which is when you start winning in an amateur league, it's suddenly a different kind of drug than you normally get, and suddenly you're very motivated to work and get better, and you're trying new things and you're growing. Because I remember our first season, that was the season when WSS Harpies was a thing, and they went 13-1. I just remember being so motivated to beat them, even though they were the better team, that I think we all grew by leaps and bounds that season. But in general, our series against MHK, I felt very strongly in upper bracket finals. I felt very strongly that MHK was the better team, but that they had pretty exploitable weaknesses, mainly in drafting. And I think this game 3 is the huge thing about this. I think this game was just straight up lost in the draft by MHK, and we were able to pull out really strong things. We're going with a Drow and Sven into a Bristleback. Like I just felt like this game was just over just from the get-go in the draft. So going into finals, the overall strategy going into this series was, we weren't really playing Dota, or I wasn't playing Dota, the rest of the team was. So I didn't really think about it like too significantly, but the main thought that I had going into the series was that we were going to radically change from game to game. Best of 5s are a different deal. Because we're not as good of a team, we need to give as many different looks as possible. We need to radically change the draft every time. And I think that's reflected in our bans. I think a lot of people might look at our bans and think they're very reactive, but really I acknowledge that Twubs had too large of a hero pool to ban out everything. And so instead of banning out everything, we would change what we were doing every time to make sure there was no like set consistency going on, because it's a best of 5. There's a lot of things that are going to change. We did get a little more set in our bans going forward, and I'll talk about that. But game 1, this was the game where we're going to take Razor first pick. We just kind of knew. We'll do Razor first pick and we'll flex it. This is the game more than any other game that I think was lost in the draft by us. There's just several things wrong about this. I think a main takeaway that we had as the series went on was that MHK had a lot of heroes that were very scary and oppressive and where we didn't have an answer to. And on the flip side, I don't think we had heroes that did that. And I think that's really highlighted by MHK's bans in pretty much every game. The Hoodwink is Orion's best hero, so I like get it, but it's also like not too broken of a hero right now, right? And Orion can run away with it, but I think it's very like, that's probably the most apt one of like, okay, this is a scary thing. Pudge like isn't on our radar really at any point unless someone's feeling it, and we hadn't played it that much. So again, this isn't like a key to victory type hero. Omni Knight, just very strong hero right now. Obviously we can play it, so that's a very good ban. And then Lena is something that Ness does play, and it's a broken hero. But I think when you look at these, it's like none of these compare to what we're banning. We're banning very specific player heroes that Twubs plays because we know if he gets something and we're not prepared for it, the game is over. I think if we got any of these 4 heroes, the game is not over. Like that's kind of the concern I have, is that it felt like every ban that we did was way more important than every ban MHK did. It was just a significant difference in skill level when it comes to an individual player. But anyways, we open to the Razor. The Ursa gets picked. This hero we just can't let go. It was a mistake to let that through. We were going to try a game because we thought Razor was just kind of maybe better against it, or maybe could survive that matchup a little better. We just have a real problem in the offlane whenever this Ursa hero is picked, though. And I think the biggest mistake in draft we made here was the support duo. I think I was picking good support heroes rather than heroes that me and Orion can take over a game on. I'm not trying to take anything away from our cores, but I think if me and Orion are not on playmaking heroes, I think one of us has to be on a playmaking hero. The games just kind of fall apart. I think having 2 save heroes is problematic on our team. We usually need a support that can start fights, that can carry fights, that can have a big team fight ult or something like that. I think Orion or I need to do one of those, and having us both on the same thing was bad. The Muerta, I think is good in theory, but it just didn't work. Enigma going through was a huge problem. I think we should have been more fearful of that hero than other heroes, but it's fine. We wanted to play a game against it. And then Sand King is fine, but I think the build here, maybe because we didn't have a team fight starter, maybe this Blink should go first. But there's not really much to say about this game. I think we also just really played terribly in this one. I think Orion and I were like trying to keep people alive and stuff like that, but again, we're both backlines where there's not much we can do, and we kind of were split up across every lane, just kind of feeding everywhere. I think this is the game more than anything that kind of tells you the difference in skill level between our teams, and that if we don't have a draft that compensates for that, then it's just kind of over. Game 2, I'm going to have a bunch of controversial takes on this one, because this game was the biggest blowout of all 4 games, and I honestly think it's actually the closest draft-wise of all 4. I truly don't think we have a bad draft here. I think we had a bit of unfortunate mixture. I don't want to talk about, well, first off, let's get it out of the way because it's going to come up in 3 different games here. I'm actually still not sure if items, the bug affected items compared to heroes. Nobody's clarified that for me. But there's going to be 3 games in the series that had that unfortunate bug. I do think in game 2, the CK bug was relatively prevalent. The fact that we ganked him multiple times, he was able to kill, like he was able to go 2v1, 3v1, which was a big deal. But in this game, as we're going through the draft, I mean, we picked this Lesh. Orion believes in this Lesh. I think the Lesh is strong, but we did let the Tinker through. Probably questionable. We changed the Enigma, we still had the Lone Druid, and we took out the Razor and the Ursa. So we're getting a very different look here as far as what we're wanting to play against. The Visage is going to be let through. Picking this Night Stalker when the CK isn't banned is definitely a mistake. It probably was amplified a lot more by the CK bug, but it's still a mistake even if the CK bug isn't there. It's just a rough lane. It's a rough matchup. He can't gank the safe laner ever. The safe laner is just too good into him. I think the Wyvern made up for that mistake a good bit, because now we have a huge counter to Visage and CK, and it was at this point in the draft, I was thinking it was going to be on me, and then the Tide was actually picked for mid. I was pretty sure this was a mid Tide Hunter. We had discussed the fact that it gave us a good team fight. We've played Wild Daddy on this Tide Hunter in mid before, and he does like the right click build. I love the AoE damage idea. I love the splash damage idea against a Visage and CK. I just think that hero is pretty good as a wonky mid. But once the last pick came out with the Timber, suddenly we were like, oh, the Tide mid doesn't make as much sense against a mid Timber, and we have this Wyvern hero that Daddy also plays, so we could easily put Daddy on the Wyvern. And I play a lot of Tide 5, or used to play a lot of Tide 5, and I'm pretty high on that hero in general as a 5. I think it can be a really aggressive laner, especially with our last pick that we end up going with Weaver. The physical damage output is actually just insane. And I heard some things in the cast, and I want to address that. One of the casters said that he believe that Weaver is a counter to Visage in lane, and I tend to believe that as well. I believe the Weaver is good against Visage, and I think with Tide, honestly, even more so. I think if I gush the Visage and Weaver gets on Visage, then it's honestly really hard for Visage to not just die every time. It's a lot like a Viper lane, where Viper is a lane dominator, but he's only a lane dominator if you let him get over 2 stacks on you. If you have more than 2 stacks on you, you need to either be going on him at that point, or you need to be running away. And you can't be in the middle. You can't just take random right clicks from him. And Visage is kind of like that too. If you let Visage sit in aggressive position and keep spamming his abilities and right clicking you, then you're doing it wrong. But when he steps up, if you actually are being aggressive on him and trying to take him down, that matchup is not that bad. The unfortunate thing is that that level 1 fight was really poor from us. We killed the CK for first blood, and then we ended up losing 3 heroes, and I honestly believe we only needed to lose 1 hero in that entire fight. And there's definitely an argument to be made that we could have backed right away, or we could have focused the Visage, or just focused someone entirely different at some point. But yeah, I think it was just a misplay. But the outcome of what would normally be a minor misplay was way overblown compared to what it would normally be, because Visage ended up coming to lane. They got all 4 runes and those 3 kills, even though we got the first blood. And I think the gold advantage, I can't quite remember what it is. I don't remember what the graph is. But it was like Visage came to lane with such a significant advantage with these stats. A minute 0 bracer and a minute 1 bracer. It was such an advantage that we went... There was a skirmish in the lane early where Visage got super low. Or maybe even died, I don't remember. And I remember thinking like, okay, the Visage can't touch me, but he's going to blow up my Weaver. If we keep the Weaver hidden until I can get the good gush and the Weaver can come in and finish him off, we can be aggressive in this lane and take him. And there was a fight that was kind of close, and I think Visage died, and then Weaver also died and respawned and came back to lane, and then died again in another close fight, but Weaver's TP was on cooldown. the lane was over from that point. Funnily enough, I felt like I could stay in the lane, which ended up with me being way further ahead than I normally am as far as levels. I think I was like level 8 and Weaver was 4 or 5 or something like that. It was kind of ridiculous. But obviously the Weaver was just kind of out of the game at that point. I don't think the game was over. We ended up killing Visage a couple times in the mid game. Weaver needed some time to get back into it, but there was a world where I could see us holding high ground. I felt really strong as Tide. I needed to finish my mech earlier and then get Greaves and stuff like that. But I saw a world where we were able to get back into it, but we did gank CK several times and got absolutely wrecked by him. And I think this game, draft-wise, even though I would change, obviously change a lot about it as far as like Night Stalker and CK and stuff like that, I actually think this draft is way closer, and that the outplay was kind of outshines everything here more than any other game. I think we just got significantly outplayed in that rune fight and then at the laning phase, and it was just kind of over from there. Game 3 is our win, and it was definitely a dramatic change in drafting philosophy where, I don't know, I think I was just trying to draft good, like try to respond to the heroes they're picking, and the problem is when you're playing responsive drafting, it's that you're answering questions that the other team is posing rather than asking them questions that they have to answer. And in this game, I kind of flipped that on its head. It's like, okay, we're not going to answer their questions anymore, other than this first pick. We'll get to that in a sec. We're not going to answer their questions anymore. I'm just going to try to give them questions that they have to solve. And I'm going to put, I'm going to put myself or Orion and Orion in this game on these playmaking heroes that can do things. They opened the Razor, which is expected. Viper is a very good hero into Razor and just a very good hero in general. I think Viper is the only hero we had in the entire series that was that Twubs level, hey, this is a scary hero, we're going to run you over if you don't address it. And then as the draft went on, they went to the Ogre. I'm not ever scared of this Ogre hero. Chandler's a good player, but Ogre as a hero is not scary. And then they would go Abaddon. And then this Meepo came out that we had banned previously and we had let through in this game. And we really didn't have a direct answer for it at that point in the draft. The Earthshaker would have been picked by us. That was definitely a good ban, but it ended up being that the SK was probably way better than anything. And they get this Medusa as well. This entire draft is just a little more late game oriented from them, which I think is a mistake. This Meepo is not as big of a snowbally hero. Like, obviously he's gonna, he wants to disappear into the jungle and come out as a big boss, but mostly Twubs is not playing those heroes. He's playing heroes that take towers and become a big boss, whether that's Broodmother or Visage or whatever. So we were kind of had a kind of a relief that he was not pressuring our towers early. This Faceless Void hero is fucking terrible. Don't actually watch these games and think that Faceless Void Pos 5 is good. There's a reason why I don't like spam this hero in pubs. But the fact is that Chrono is the best ability in the entire game. It can equalize games that you have no business equalizing, and it's an uncounterable ability that is broken beyond words. It's a lot like Enigma's Black Hole, right? Those are the two abilities that break the game. And because of that, it doesn't matter how bad he is in the laning phase, because he is terrible in the laning phase. It doesn't matter how weak his kit as a support is. It doesn't matter how nonsensical his item build is. As long as he has Chrono, it doesn't really matter. People are talking about the Meteor Hammer, by the way. The Meteor Hammer is probably absolutely the wrong pick. I just do it because that's what I do. It does do it. Back when Faceless Void Pos 5 was popular and actually was good, because there were several patches where it was good, you would get the Meteor Hammer because Faceless Void doesn't have wave clear unless he's going right click, and the Meteor Hammer used to give you cheap wave clear. Now it's expensive wave clear, but it also has a very straightforward combo with the Chrono that you have an easy setup for the Meteor Hammer. Meteor Hammer ended up being great in this game. I think I landed it on like Meepo so many times outside of Chrono. I was landing it. It was very weird. It's usually not that good of a pick. Yeah, it's probably tied for my best hero or my second best hero, and I needed to be playing my best heroes, and I wasn't doing that in other games, and that was definitely a mistake. I'm not playing enough Dota to be playing heroes that aren't my best heroes, but my best heroes I can play even if I'm not playing Dota, so that was definitely a strategical mistake on my part. I should have been playing heroes that I know I could do well on. There was also this problem of Twubs in the laning phase that was a question that we were talking about throughout the drafting. How can we fix me and Ness's lane against Twubs? And I think it's a little multifaceted in that Twubs plays a lot of heroes that are really good into my quote-unquote lane bullies. I think early in the season we played a Treant game, which is a lane bully, and he plays Broodmother, and the Broodmother just eats Tree alive. And I remember we lost that lane really bad. Other lane bullies I play, like Undying, just aren't good enough right now. They're not good enough of lane bullies. And then you have heroes like Weaver, which is probably one of my best lane bullies, but like he's kind of iffy on support. And then we have to think about getting stuns on other heroes. There's just a lot of, there's a question of whether you're going to play for the draft for the lane or you're going to draft for the game. And I definitely think I was drafting more for the game than the lane, and that was a mistake. But that's all hindsight, because I think at the time we were kind of thinking that we also needed to think about the game overall, because we needed playmaking heroes, we needed heroes that start fights, and so it's kind of tough. The Faceless Void is a good example of not thinking about the lane at all, picking this hero that's garbage in lane. But we did something else to fix these lanes, and I do think it probably contributed almost entirely to the win, which was we got the Wind Ranger thinking it was going to be Faceless Wind against Razor in the off lane. And I think that's an okay lane. I don't think it's a good lane, but I think it's an okay lane, and we were going to survive. But then the Meepo came out, and I was suddenly not confident at all in this Wind Ranger Faceless Void into Meepo. I thought that sounds terrible. And we did a lane switch, which I do think was a blessing, not because it turned out better for Wind. Wind actually lost the lane, I think, in off lane, just as hard as, maybe not as hard as game 2, but just as hard as like game 1 and game 4. But the difference was that Twubs was shut down a lot more by the Viper. And I think that was a bigger part of our success, because this hasn't always been the case, but R&B this season, 10 to 20 minutes is definitely our weakest point. And it's something that we tried to address and, just didn't resolve as the season went on. And Twubs is a 10 to 20 minute player. He's a push your towers, group up, and win the game type player. And I think it was a real problem that we just had mismatching styles in that way, that we were bad from 10 to 20 and he was good from 10 to 20. And even if we could pull out these miracle games in late game, it just felt very rough that we weren't able to exert that kind of pressure. So Viper was able to fix that issue partially. It was still a comeback of a game. We still lost the early game because we weren't exerting pressure. The Wind was behind, and Meepo and Razor were still pushing the game. It's also a game where the Razor did lose in mid, and we had we had this interesting question of the Sand King that did well. But overall, this game is just Faceless Void shenanigans, Ember shenanigans, Viper shenanigans. And I mean, this is kind of more how R&B was going to win. It's by cheesing. We have heroes that are very different than what a lot of people have seen. Twubs is also someone who has a lot of heroes that most people don't see. But our heroes maybe are a little more just plain bad. Like Faceless Void is just straight up bad, but he's just weird, and you're not expecting the impact that he ends up having. Game 4, I think we have the better draft, to be honest. This one's a little frustrating. I shouldn't have put myself on Wyvern. I think I went from doing a playmaking hero to, again, doing a defensive hero. And this Alk Quap combo was an absolute nightmare for both supports in Hoodwink and in Wyvern. The jumping to the back line, the swift blink on Alk, and the fact that I didn't go blink first was a mistake. I went this Force Staff, but the Force Staff was not helping me against the blinks from both those heroes. I needed something that was going to react a little quicker. Maybe I go Glimmer into blink. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just Ghost up there. There's several things I could have done. Honestly, if I was going to change it, I would just not play the hero. We picked it because the CK was in the game again. It was good against CK. And, you know, there's Sven in the game. There's a lot of things in the game as far as physical damage, and we can kind of disrupt that with Wyvern. I can kind of cold embrace people and not be afraid. I think this Timber pick was a great pick for us, honestly. It's not a good mid matchup, but other than that, it's just kind of a good game for it. And even though we lost bottom, I didn't feel like we lost bottom. I was a little confused when I got out of the game and it said we lost bottom hard. I'm not actually sure what's up with that. Let's actually look at the lane here. So Ness went 0-1-1. I went 0-2-1. Alk went 1-0-3, and Chandler was 1-1-3. So we definitely lost it. The CS though was pretty even. Ness had 64 and Alk at 55. It didn't feel at the time like we were losing it. I felt like we were able to keep them off with Arctic Burn against those two heroes. It's kind of a rough lane, but at least it wasn't as much of a disaster as other games were. I felt like we could come back, and then this game kind of got out of control as far as play goes. They got a couple items that were problematic. We had some bad fights. I felt like I was playing poorly. I was getting picked off at the beginning of fights. We weren't really grouping up very well. Yeah, I think this was just another example of a game that kind of got away from us as far as play. We just got outplayed in general. Even if our draft was technically better, I do think it was technically better. I think MHK were just better players. Did the CK bug impact this game? Maybe a little bit. I do think we went on him a couple times. I remember one very specific time where like me and SK went on CK in the top, and he like 2v1'd us, and then after we died, Timber came up and killed him. So at least we got the kill, but everybody died for it. But yeah, I don't think the bug really changes anything about the series as a whole. I think MHK are better players, and maybe R&B is a little more dynamic. Although, to be honest, I think when you look at the drafts of these games, it looks like MHK was the more dynamic team, and I kind of agree with that. That Twubs is a dynamic player. He's got too many heroes to ban out. He's got too many different problems to answer. But there are a lot of heroes that also do the same thing. Lone Druid, Visage, Broodmother. These are the same hero, just in different skins. And we have things that counter them. It was just about whether or not we can get out of that laning phase. And unfortunately, I think me and Ness, I think I'm not playing enough Dota to support Ness in the lane or playing at a high enough level. You know, am I as an Archon 5 ever going to be playing at enough a level to beat a Divine 1? Yes, I've done it before. We've had those matchups before in Conquer or in lower divisions as well. I am confident that I can beat the higher level players, but I think I was letting him down both with my hero choices for him and me, and then I probably just wasn't polished enough in my play lately or playing enough Dota to really not let him down in the lane. Me and Ness have never been a good lane, and Ness even on other teams is not a good laner, but we had kind of found a groove as the season went on, but it just wasn't enough. But you know, now I'm going to take some time off. I just don't like grinding Dota right now. I still love Dota. The series last night honestly made me want to play Dota. And obviously there's a new hero and TI is going to come up. I'm sure I'm going to get the Dota itch, but I'm getting into competitive Lorcana, so I'm going to focus on that for now. At least takes up that brain space that Dota normally does. And man, pubbing in Dota is just terrible lately. I just don't know what it is. Like, I acknowledge, like, I love playing an 82L, and one, I would like to keep playing 82L if it meant that I could play at a high level as I normally have been able to, but I can't play at a high level if I can't also pub. Okay, you have to be playing Dota in order to be good at Dota. And I just don't want to play Dota because just the pub quality's been so bad lately. I don't know what it. I think we just need another banhammer on Smurfs or something. It feels like 50% of the games have Smurfs. I don't feel like any of the heroes I play are necessarily too fun right now, so maybe it's a bit on me as far as need to learn some other heroes or something. I don't know. Just pubs haven't been that fun. I'm gonna take a season break. It's been 10 straight seasons, so I'll probably come back a little refreshed and hopefully things will be a little different. Heck, I'll probably start standing in for teams after TI because I'll probably get the Dota itch after watching TI. So I'll probably be asking a bunch of teams if I can stand in. But need to take some time off, play some games with the kids, play some Lorcana. And yeah, this was a series where we were not as good. I think we kind of got to finals through sheer attrition and the fact that we're R&B and we play different Dota, but it kind of let us down in the end once we got to a team that was more in tune with the patch, more in tune with Dota in general, and just kind of better players that are rising in rank rather than kind of sitting in rank and not trying hard, right? Not on that grind to learn Dota. But good series. GGs MHK. No way in hell am I going to try to redo these games. I'm too tired. I'm so exhausted. Went to bed at like 2:30 a.m. and woke up at 8 a.m., which isn't that bad, but it felt really bad to do a full day of work after that. Whatever. GGs. Good games. Adios, everybody.